Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Christy Moore. I'm a genetic counselor at Ambry Genetics. We are so pleased to partner with such a fantastic group, CysticLife, who is advocating for a healthy and fit lifestyle for people with cystic fibrosis. Last week, Ambry employees participated in a CysticLife support day where we dressed in our favorite fitness gear and we took a nice long walk together and learned about the importance of fitness in the lives of people with CF. And here are a few pictures from the event. It was a lot of fun. You can see we're wearing T-shirts. We're based in Southern California, so in December we can do that kind of thing here. So in today's webinar, the creator of CysticLife will be sharing about his group and how the patient community has come together to decide what type of research they wanted done. We'll also learn about the study itself, the goals, and a novel approach to funding. So I'd like to introduce our three speakers for today. Up first, we have Ronnie Sharp. He is the founder of CysticLife, an organization centered around positive transformation. CysticLifeorg is the leading social network for the cystic fibrosis community with over 8,000 members. He is a true believer in the power of social media and speaks nationally at health-related conferences about the impact of social media in healthcare. He is an avid exerciser and blogs regularly about his daily trials and triumphs on his site, runsickboyrun.com. He hopes his blog shows other individuals with CF and their families that through a commitment to treatments and exercise, we can be the best versions of ourselves. He is a graduate of the University of Arizona with a degree in psychology, and he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis as an infant. Second up, we'll have Dr. Julie Desch. She is a 55-year-old CF survivor. She attended Stanford Medical School, where she worked in the Cystic Fibrosis Research Laboratory. She continued on at Stanford, completing a residency and 2 fellowships in anatomic pathology. After training, she worked for 5 years at Kaiser Hospital in San Francisco as a surgical and skin pathologist. After retiring to take better care of herself and to be a mom, she became a certified personal trainer and wellness coach. She now enjoys coaching children and adults with cystic fibrosis through her nonprofit organization, New Day Wellness, to live as healthfully as possible. She is passionate about spreading the word about the benefits of fitness, healthy lifestyle, nutrition, and stress management to the CF community through her blog, sickandhappy.com. She writes the wellness column for the CF Roundtable, which is a publication for and by adults with cystic fibrosis, and is a member of the Research Advisory Board for Cystic Fibrosis Research Incorporated. Our third speaker is Courtney Wheatley, Ph.D. She is a postdoctoral fellow at the Cardiovascular Research Lab of Bruce Johnson at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. She did her dissertation on cystic fibrosis and is continuing that research interest in showing that exercise is medicine for individuals with CF. Courtney got her BS in both chemistry and biology from Iowa Wesleyan College and her PhD from the University of Arizona. Thank you so much, all three of you, for speaking for us today. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Ronnie. Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you very much, Christy, for that introduction. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. As Christy said, I'm a cystic fibrosis patient and founder and community servant at CysticLife. And today is all about the process we took to hopefully establish a patient-centered research community for cystic fibrosis. And as you'll see, we even took it a step further, I believe, and really are focused on making it patient-driven research, a break from the traditional kind of top-down method of research, and even the patient-centered, where as a patient myself, when I hear patient-centered, I believe that to mean eventually it gets back to the patient. Where at CysticLife, we want to start with the patient, have the patient be the pebble that starts the ripples in the water and kind of move out from there. So this is CysticLife.org, the CysticLife.org homepage, and that's kind of the lifeblood of our organization. We do offline things as well, such as education. We've done grants in the past, and of course we connect to other great organizations, videos, blogs, etc. But CysticLife.org is kind of the meat of what we do, and that's an online social network established in 2010. And you can see right at the top, the three things we're really focused on is being real, being positive, and then being a community. And so we really encourage those things in all discussions on Cystic Life. After 5 years, I'm very pleased that we've been able to kind of keep that in our community. Generally, people who come there feel lifted up and get answers. And so as the community servant here, it's really nice to see. We're at just about 8,500 members, and the split there is roughly 40% of our members are patients, 40% are parents, and then the other 20% are physicians, other medical personnel, and so on. The most active portion of CysticLife.org is our questions forum. As you can imagine, whether you're a newly diagnosed family or somebody with CF, you're going to have a lot of questions, and you're going to want to know what is successful, what works for others. And so that is by far our most active section on the site. To date, we've had nearly 10,000 questions asked with as many questions answered. But on Cystic Life, you can also blog, which we have members who actively keep up a blog on Cystic Life. You can search for other members that are more like you, whether it be by gender or location. And then you could also access different educational material that we've produced and we send off to many clinics around the world. And so you can access that educational material. For the question section, it's like any question form you're kind of used to, where you can post any question and you can place it in a certain category, and that allows other members then to search by categories for a particular question, or you can search by a keyword. In this case, the keyword was sterilizers, and that would bring up multiple questions about sterilizers. I think what we see most often on Cystic Life is what I call RealLife Questions. And, you look at this question that's displayed, which I would call a very typical question, which is simply just trying to improve either their daily life or overall health. Something as simple as, how do you guys stop your cough at night? Something like this had almost 35,000 views. So it was obviously something that other people were interested in and wanted to know. And then with that, when you have these real-life questions, you can imagine how much anecdotal evidence and information is being shared daily on Cystic Life. And so about 3 years ago, we started thinking about how can we take all of this information and do something else with it. And ultimately, we said to ourselves, how can we take all this anecdotal evidence and either lend it to research or have it be the start of research? Because we didn't want it all to go to waste, so to speak, or just stay on Cystic Life, but to hopefully use it for a higher purpose. Around that time, we were presented with an opportunity from an organization called PCORI, which is the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. And they were giving out contracts or awards for exactly what we were looking to do, as fate would have it. And they wanted to give essentially seed money to help small organizations or even individual patients or individual researchers create a community and get people all at the same table, from patients to parents to researchers to clinical coordinators, et cetera. Get them all at the same table, get them talking, and start research from that table. And ultimately, PCORI wants us to identify comparative effectiveness research questions. That's kind of their main goal, is that at the end of this PCORI award, we're able to submit a full grant proposal that is based on comparative effectiveness research. And so we were fortunate enough 2 years ago to get that award. We were one of 30 organizations to be awarded what's called a Tier 1 contract. So when we got the news that we were awarded this, the first thing that we did was establish the CysticLife Research Advisory Board, lovingly known as CRAB. And this, of course, was because CysticLife's a patient-run organization and all volunteer-based. And most of those volunteers are also patients. So we, of course, have participated in a ton of research, but that doesn't necessarily mean we know what we're talking about when it comes to the nuts and bolts of research and doing what's necessary to take anecdotal evidence all the way through to a full research proposal. So we put together this group whose main job is to identify, initiate, and support innovative approaches to patient-centered research in the cystic fibrosis community. It includes, it's a board of 9 people, from patients to parents to researchers. I included, we have PhDs on there, MBAs, just to highlight just the range of talent and the range of ideas and backgrounds that people are coming with. I thought that was so important to make sure that we had, diversity of opinion as we move forward. We have nearly 200 years of combined CF research experience. And more importantly to me, we have over 200 years of living with cystic fibrosis represented on the board. And so truly, we like to think of this as a patient-driven experience where we encourage patients on the board to really lead the conversations and be the driver of this project. After we established that board, the first thing we did was send a call out to the Cystic Life community because we wanted to know, what do they want researched? It wasn't about what this board wanted researched, but we wanted ideas from the community. And so we sent out a very simple newsletter with the subject line, "We want your research ideas." And we were pleasantly surprised to see that newsletter had the highest open rate in the history of our organization. Excuse me. So what does that mean? Well, that to me means that our community is very interested in not only research, but they're very interested in giving their opinion and being involved in research. They have things that they believe is important that's not being researched. And so we had over 60 research questions submitted to start with, and that included a lot of doubles and triples, and so it was well over or close to 100 that we actually had submitted. But then after taking some of the questions or combining some of the questions because they were closely related, we ended up with 60 research questions to start with. So we had a great base from the community to start. We took these the Research Advisory Board took these questions, and we used a scoring rubric to identify the best 5 questions or topics that were submitted. I put best in quotes there because it's not necessarily the best research questions according to a researcher or the best research questions according to a patient, but they were what we felt the best research questions for our group, for our community, because, we really wanted to take this and turn it into real hard research. And so we knew, for instance, we weren't going to be able to have our first study cost $10 million. And so, the cost of the research was one of those categories in the scoring rubric, as well, of course, safety to the participants, the potential impact of the research. I mentioned the cost to run research, the burden, and a very important one was the burden to participate in the research that was ultimately selected. Interest by the scientific community. Certainly, we would like to do or have a question that other researchers or the scientific community is interested in. And then finally, we looked at the feasibility to deploy a study. It was the last category. And so after scoring those questions, we, like I said, ended up with 5 that we gave back to the community. We took those 5 questions, and we each of those questions got their own kind of section, like you see here on CysticLife, and we described the research or kind of the nugget, what we would start with, and so, like, for instance, do you think that exercise can effectively replace one or more traditional airway clearance techniques? And then we would see through a poll called a SNAP poll, we would see very quickly what people thought about that and if they were interested. And so we asked them on a scale from 1 to 5 to rate their interest in this particular question, 5 being they're most interested in this particular question. And so we did this SNAP poll feature so people could quickly and easily kind of give their opinion and lend their support. And we're very thankful that throughout this process we've gathered other partners, one of those partners being our tech partner, Althea Health, who helped develop these SNAP polls. And what was cool with these SNAP polls is we also allowed members to attach SNAP polls to questions that they asked the community. And those questions that had SNAP polls attached saw higher engagement, and which makes sense because they're easier and quicker to engage with by just clicking a button. But anyways, we took those 5 questions and we laid them out to the community. We said, this is where we think we can start. What are you guys most interested in? And we allowed the community to vote on that and tell us what they were most interested in. As you can see on the table on the right, the question they were most interested in was around exercise versus traditional airway clearance techniques. We also had a question in there on supplements and CF care. You see the next is a nutrition question, targeted eating versus a traditional CF diet. Fourth was hours of sleep and quality of life. Do the number of hours slept by a person with CF negatively or positively impact their quality of life? And then finally, the importance of a mindfulness-based stress reduction course. So the exercise question came in first place. And that was, and you'll see the first 2, they were pretty close, but ultimately the exercise question was the winner. And so that's the one we ran with. And after we got those results, the next thing we did was establish this exercise research committee. And again, our exercise research committee has a variety of backgrounds. They're from all over the nation. They are from institutions like the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins, Stanford, and of course, they all have a keen interest in exercise or cystic fibrosis, and for most of these members, both. They have a lot of experience in both categories, both exercise and CF, and some as like Courtney. You heard about Courtney, who will be speaking later. That's been in her early career, kind of her wheelhouse, is cystic fibrosis and exercise, as well as you can probably see the picture there of David Ornstein and Frank Cerny, who have essentially devoted their entire careers to studying exercise and CF. And so we were so fortunate to be able to kind of assemble this all-star committee to hopefully move us forward in this exercise research question. Anytime I talk about anything we're doing at CysticLife, I always need to go back to kind of what I consider our number one partner. Putting together these committees, these research advisory boards, I think it's fantastic. I'm so proud of the work that we've done this far. Being able to take a question submitted by somebody at CysticLife all the way up to where we currently are, which is getting, funding and writing out the research and the specific aims that Courtney will highlight later. So proud of that work. But I have to acknowledge the Cystic Life community and the broader cystic fibrosis community. None of this would be possible without them. They're instrumental in anything we do. I'm so lucky to be a part of this community. I'm so fortunate that when we ask for their opinion, when we ask them to participate in something, they participate in spades. And I just feel so blessed to be able to do what I do every day. And I think that's the key to patient-driven research is diversity of opinion. You can't just ask people who are exercise fanatics what they want studied, but you need to ask the whole community at large. And so that's what we did, and ultimately did land on the exercise question. But again, so thankful to them. They're so responsive, and they're the drivers of this project. So if you guys are listening, again, a huge thank you. And finally, just a big thank you again to those who are on the webinar, and to Ambry for hosting this for us. We really appreciate it. You can see my contact info there. Please reach out to me at any time. Come visit or hopefully join Cystic Life, join the conversation. You can follow what we do on Facebook and Twitter. And I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. So with that, I'm going to pass the ball to Julie Desch.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'm waiting for my first slide here. Oh, there it is. So welcome, everyone. My purpose, I believe, for being here is to sort of be the patient representative of people who are really intrigued by this relationship between exercise and health in people with CF. So I thought I'd start with a question that I've been starting to ask myself every year on my birthday morning. And as you see, it's a little perplexing to me about the question of why am I still here? So to go into that a little bit further, the facts of my life my CF life, that is, in 4 lines is, first of all, I just turned 55 years old. I am a Delta F508 homozygous person, so I have 2 copies of very significant CFTR problems. I still have my own lungs. I haven't had a transplant. In fact, I'm not even close at this point to being on a transplant list because my lungs are remarkably still at about 70% lung function. So this is somewhat perplexing to me, both as a CF patient, as I see friends of mine who have passed away or who are having much more significant problems with their CF. And it's also perplexing given my family history. So I kind of consider myself a little bit of a middle-aged CF mutant warrior, and I think I'm probably a bit of a mutant in the fact that I'm doing so well with 2 copies of Delta F. I don't know if I have some kind of genetic thing going on, but I do have had 2 older siblings who passed away from cystic fibrosis. Admittedly, they were both pretty old when they passed away. My sister Kathy died when she was 31, but this was 25 years ago. So living to 31, 25 years ago was a long time. And then my brother Tom died when he was 58. But if I look at the quality of life both Kathy and Tom had from the beginning to the end, their quality of life was remarkably more significantly impaired than mine has ever been. So I don't know that at least genetics of the CFTR gene can explain what's going on. I don't know if it's epigenetic. I mean, these days we know that your genome doesn't tell the whole story. There are these epigenetic factors that control whether or not or how your genes are being expressed. So perhaps I have some kind of epigenetic factor that is increasing the expression of my CFTR gene, mutant as it is, and maybe I just have more CFTR channels where they need to be, and therefore have some residual function. I don't know that. That's just a question I have. Or perhaps I have an epigenetic down-regulator of the ENaC gene. Who knows? Is it because I was the youngest in my family? We had 7 kids, 3 of which had CF, and I was the baby. I was born in 1960, so it's true that Kathy and Tom, they had nothing. The only thing they had in terms of, preventative type treatment was sleeping in a mist tent. And while I never did that, certainly as treatments and preventative measures have become available, I have jumped on absolutely everything possible. So, but remember, I'm 55, so nothing really became possible until 20 years ago when I started to use the vest, and then Pulmozyme, and then Toby, and then hypertonic saline. But for the first 35 years of my life, there really wasn't anything. And then the final question is it environmental? So my parents did smoke when they were much younger, and possibly Kathy and Tom were both exposed to smoke, and they both quit, of course, as soon as they were diagnosed, and I was not exposed to any smoke. But we know that babies with CF being exposed to cigarette smoke is a very, very bad thing. And that didn't happen to me, whereas it possibly did with my older sibs with CF. So, but none of these things actually could possibly explain, I don't think, everything that's going on in my story. But one thing that I think has possibly, affected my life significantly has been my exercise habit. So if you look at this chart, this is sort of the story of my lungs. And on the left-hand side, that's, when I was born, they were at 100%. And on the right-hand side is today, and they're at about 70%. So as you'll see, everything up until about age 35, when I first started working at I say real job, because it was, after residency, which of course is a job, but nobody counts it as such. I stayed pretty stable. And that's up to age 35. And there's no real medical reason for that. And then you'll see that after the age of 85, wow, I'm jumping ahead. After the age of 35, when I started working and had less time for other activities because I commuted an hour each way to my job, my lung function started to decline. I made the decision to retire at 39, and since then, I've literally remained stable. There have been some ups and downs, of course, with exacerbations, but it's it's bizarre. I look back at my PFTs from 18 years ago, and they're roughly the same in terms of percent predicted that they are now. Of course, volume has gone down because I'm older, but percent predicted has stayed pretty stable. So what is going on? So what I think has been going on is that from the age of 15 on, I have been pretty much an exercise addict. I started jogging when I was in high school, and I continued a very rigorous exercise program through high school, through college, through medical school, through residency, and when it really had to kind of diminish because of the commute and because I just didn't have time, was after that first job. And that's when things started to, I wouldn't say tank because I didn't go down, rapidly, but I started to have significant decline. And I also didn't stop exercising completely, of course, but I didn't have the time to exercise as frequently or as rigorously as I do now. And, I'm a pathologist, right? So I'm sitting at a desk staring into a microscope for 8 hours. So even, just being active throughout the day, that had to stop as well during those 5 years that I worked. So my best guess about why I'm staying as healthy as I am, and I have to say I'm a little bit nervous even talking about this because I guess I'm a little superstitious, and I don't normally go around bragging about my lung function because I honestly don't think it has 100% to do with what I do. I think a lot of it has to do with what's going on with my genome and my epigenome. But my best guess is that, number one, I am obsessively compliant with whatever is available. So, I don't even question it. If it's available, I do it. I've been an exercise addict, like I said before, for 40 years and counting. I've got, of course, an incredible support system with my family and friends and serious motivation. And sorry about the language, but I know there has to be somewhere in my genome 1 or 2 or 3 or more kick-ass modifier genes, because otherwise this just doesn't make a lot of sense. So here's my CF routine, and I just call it CF routine because it's only a small portion of my life. I vest, and I also do the VibraLung percussor at least 30 minutes twice a day. If I'm sick, that goes up. Of course, I do the albuterol, hypersol, pulmozyme, whatever's available twice a day. I use, these days I'm on continuous aerosol antibiotics, and my current regimen is Casetin and colistin. And then sometimes I need IV antibiotics, of course, so at least once or twice a year. And interestingly, my very first need for IVs didn't occur until I was at my job, and I was 36 years old. So go figure. My life routine, which has less to do with my CF and more to do with just life, you can see my 2 sons on the left, which are my constant motivators. Whenever I feel like I'm, lazy, I don't want to go to the gym for some reason, or don't want to get out and jog or whatever it is I'm doing, I think about them, and I think about how I desperately want to be there when it comes time for me to hold grandbabies. I mean, that's been a goal of mine since Phoenix, the one on the left, was born almost 19 years ago. And I also just want to see them grow up and become the fabulous young men that they have become. In the upper right is my pack of dogs. You're right. I count 5. It's true, and I've always had dogs. And I think actually every CF clinician should write a prescription not only for exercise but for at least one puppy, because they get you out, they make you walk, they make you play, they get you up out of your seat, and I am firmly of the belief that activity and being active throughout the day is very, very important. And then on the bottom right, you can see my attempt at a deadlift, which brings me to the next slide, which is my exercise history. So I started, like I said, in high school with jogging. I got quickly introduced to weight training, which I fell in love with immediately. So I started weight training throughout college and medical school, and ever since then I've been big into weights. I've also done various long-distance jogging. I did a half marathon with the Stengel twins a few years ago, which was very, very fun. These days, my joints don't really like it when I do much jogging. So my most favorite activity these days, besides free weights and body weight exercise, is something called metabolic training with kettlebells, where I keep my heart rate up for a very good long period of time doing various activities with kettlebells, kettlebell swings, snatches, presses, squats, you name it. Kettlebells have become my favorite tool of choice in the exercise realm. So the reason I'm excited about this question of exercise, and the reason I said yes to Ronnie twice when he asked me to be part of the committees he's forming, is because if you look at my life is probably, I spend less time on treatments than most people with CF, just because I'm at this point healthy. I mean, I do what I can do, what I'm prescribed to do, but as it is, between treatment time and exercise time, that's 3 to 4 hours a day, and that's significant. It's very significant. If you add up the time that it takes to, keep your nutrition up, keep your rest up, keep your stress management up, I would say the time that it takes to stay healthy with cystic fibrosis is clearly a full-time job. So with this question about exercise, the thing that excites me about it is if we learn that you could replace, say, 30 minutes of exercise, moderate intensity exercise, that could replace a vest session, that would be huge, because you could subtract a significant chunk of time that you spend sitting in a chair, which is what I do when I vest, with getting up and moving around and doing something that is not just good for your lungs, as the vest is, but it's also good for your psyche, for your stress management, for your brain, for your mood. Exercise is not just for the lungs. It's for so much more of the rest of how human beings are designed to be. They're designed to be moving around and moving things and running and, everything that we can do. So if we could replace sitting in a chair with a vest on with moving for 30 minutes, I think that would be awesome. And maybe we won't find that. Maybe we will find that the reason that I am as healthy as I am is because of the addition of exercise to everything else. Maybe that would be a little bit of a bummer to people with CF, because it means they have to do more if they want to stay as healthy. But at least we would know. And the reason that this current study that we're contemplating is huge is because it's going to be a very large study. And as Courtney will probably tell you soon, most of the studies about CF and exercise have been pretty small because it's hard to conduct such a study, and pretty short term. So the study that we're contemplating doing, because it's crowdsourced, is going to be very large, and will be an observational study, so we don't, we can gather information almost passively from people, and you'll hear more about the study design from Courtney. So I'm very, very excited about this project, and with that, I'm going to pass the ball to Courtney.
All right, thank you, Julie. So I'm going to start by kind of summarizing some of the exercise data of what has been shown in CF to start with. So first, if we look at current therapy for CF, the ideal therapy is one that prevents the characteristic 2 to 3% annual decline in forced expiratory flow volume in 1 second of the forced vital capacity. And also you want to improve it in salt transport, because that's the primary crux behind the pathophysiology of CF. So in 2009, a U.S. survey determined that, on average, CF patients spend about 108 minutes a day completing a median of 7 daily therapies. And these are including drug therapies that take 50 minutes. They include airway clearance or postural drainage, and vest was 29 minutes, and exercise was 29 minutes. And as Julie mentioned, CF treatment is a full-time job. So when I started my graduate studies, when I was learning about CF and the treatment of it, what I found most interesting is that many of these symptoms that are being treated by drug therapy can also be targeted with exercise. Exercise can activate different pathways that are also helping to mediate mucus clearance, have an anti-inflammatory benefit. They increase energy consumption, so you want to eat more, so that kind of thing was starting too. And so exercise, the benefits of exercise seem kind of clear to me, but it's always been underutilized therapy regimen, even though there's been research done for decades that has shown that exercise is beneficial. And this specifically, if there's a self-reported adherence to exercise, CF patients were about 24% adherence. That's the lowest it's been reported at. It has been reported up to about 50%. For the next few slides, I'm just going to highlight a few key studies that demonstrated the benefits of exercise in CF. So first, we'll go with Dr. Ornstein's work. And so in 1981, he had a group of 31 CF patients, and ended up being 20 patients in their exercise group and 7 patients that finished there in their control group. And these exercise group patients completed a 3-month running program. And what he did was compare their change in peak VO2, or a measure of aerobic capacity, which is measured here in this slide as the peak VO2, or volume of oxygen consumed. What they demonstrated is that the exercise group who completed the 3-month program had a significant increase in aerobic capacity, as well as an improvement in respiratory muscle endurance, whereas the control group showed no change in peak VO2, but also a significant decline in their FEV1 measure. The effects of exercise on facilitating sputum clearance have also been investigated. So in a study of 18 CF patients, they completed a 2-month home exercise program, which was just 10 minutes of cycling for 5 times a week. And they compared the amount of ability for exercise to facilitate sputum clearance, and found that it was greater than just resting, but that if you compared it to chest physiotherapy alone, it was not as productive. So you had a mean average of about 9.8 versus 4 grams physiotherapy versus exercise. But following that up, there was another study by Baldwin et al. Who demonstrated that the use of exercise as an adjunct to chest physiotherapy caused an increase in sputum expectoration, suggesting that there was an additive effect of using exercise prior to chest PT. This was followed up by another study by Dwyer et al. Who looked at different modes of exercise versus just resting breathing on ease of sputum expectoration. And what they found was that they had 14 subjects complete a 3-treatment crossover study, and the subjects completed 20 minutes of either resting breathing on one visit, and then they had 2 follow-up randomized visits that were either on a treadmill or at a cycle at a moderate intensity, which was prescribed about 60% of their peak VO2. What they found was that the ease of expectoration was increased following either exercise mode, cycling or treadmill. But then when they compared different properties of the sputum itself, they found that with the treadmill, they were actually decreased the mechanical impedance of the sputum, so it's easier to clear and move following treadmill more significantly than with cycling. And this hypothesized reason for this was that the trunk oscillations that are happening with being on the treadmill and walking or even running was facilitating that, whereas your thorax is kind of stationary when you're on the bike. Next, the effect of exercise on pulmonary function was evaluated by Schneiderman Walker et al. They had 65 patients complete a 3-year study, and they had just had subjects exercise 20 minutes of their favorite aerobic activity. Some of them were running, swimming, cycling, soccer, different activities, and they just asked them to complete that 3 times a week, and suggested intensity was about 70 to 80% of their max heart rate. And what they found was that in this 3-year period, the control subjects demonstrated the characteristic 2 to 3% decline, whereas in our exercise group, they slowed the rate of decline. This significantly with forced vital capacity, this FVC, was only less than 1% declined over that 3-year period or annually, whereas if the control group, it was at that 2% a year, and also a similar trend with FEV1, noticing about half the rate of decline in the exercise group of that of the control group. So Nixon et al. Tried to look at the effect of exercise on survival. So this is one of the largest CF exercise studies that was done, and 109 CF patients were recruited. They performed a maximal exercise test to determine their aerobic fitness, and then they studied them as a follow-up for 8 years to determine their survival rate. What was found was that individuals in this high aerobic fitness group, which is classified as a VO2 peak of greater than 82% predicted, had a significantly lower risk of dying than the low aerobic fitness group, which is classified as a VO2 peak less than 58% predicted. So specifically, patients who had a higher aerobic fitness were more than 3 times as likely to survive than patients with a lower fitness level. And so this study also demonstrated that aerobic capacity, or VO2 here, was an independent predictor of survival in patients with CF. Hevestert et al. Built upon this findings, where he took 71 patients, and they had them either both wear an accelerometer and measure accelerometer counts, and also had the patients report their time spent performing moderate or vigorous physical activity, and correlated this with their maximal exercise test results on their VO2 max. In the bottom panel C here, that's just percent predicted, or in the upper two graphs, that's absolute value is corrected for kilograms or their weight. But in both, regardless of its accelerometer counts or time spent, both were correlated very well with aerobic capacity, saying there was a positive association between being physically active and having a high aerobic fitness level. The research on iron regulation and exercise followed up a little bit farther after that. The first study was done by Assewald et al., who looked at the effect of exercise on iron regulation just using a measurement of nasal potential difference on this NPD. And so you have a little tube up your nose, it's perfusing various solutions and looking at the changes in the potential across that membrane. And CF patients generally have a lower nasal potential difference to start with. And what was found was that with moderate exercise, there was a normalization of this NPD. So by the end of the 12 minutes of exercise that these patients were doing, there was no significant difference between healthy and CF patients or subjects. This was followed up by Hevestert et al., who again looked at specifically the measures of epithelial sodium channel, or ENOC activity. And they did this by perfusing the nostril with amiloride to block that current and see if there was a change. And what was found was that the effects of amiloride on nasal potential difference were reduced during exercise in both healthy and CF. In the first panel here, A, you see that at rest, the white bars, there's the delta PD amiloride was reduced when you're in exercise, that black bar there. So there's a significant reduction in the current that was created, and this is indicating that exercise was inhibiting ENOC activity or reducing that sodium current. And we know in CF that's hyperactive, so if we can block that, more power to us, or hopefully helping to hydrate that airway surface liquid in the mucus. Then what was followed up was Schmidt et al. Looked at the intensity dependency of the exercise on this influence of iron conductance. And so what they did, they had 3 groups: controls, exercise, asthma-induced patients, and also cystic fibrosis. And we're just going to focus on panel B here, cystic fibrosis group. And what was found was that they took them and had a maximal exercise test, so that's the M bar, and had a resting value of NPD. And then they also did a submaximal exercise visit where they were at 50% of their max workload. And what they found was that exercise results in a significant intensity-dependent inhibition. So the inhibition of this amiloride current was only significant with the maximal exercise. The submaximal exercise was slightly reduced, but it wasn't significantly different. So there is a dose dependency with exercise. You need to meet a certain threshold in order to be at the effectiveness you need. Specifically, if you're looking at iron regulation, effects of mucus clearance could be different. That research hasn't really been defined as to a specific dose you need yet. So then in my dissertation work, I wanted to compare the effects of a treatment, which I used albuterol, to a bout of exercise on specifically iron regulation, pulmonary function, and gas diffusion. And so I had 16 CF patients, as well as a healthy control group, but I'm just going to present on the CF, complete 2 treatment visits, one where they received albuterol, and we measured the measurements at baseline, 30 minutes post, and 60 minutes post of the nebulization. And then on another randomized visit, they completed 3 randomized 15-minute exercise bouts at a low intensity, moderate intensity, and a vigorous intensity. And there was 40 minutes of recovery between each bout. And what we found was that if we looked at pulmonary function, which isn't displayed in the figure here. If we just look at forced vital capacity, vigorous intensity had a significant decline in FVC with patients with cystic fibrosis. But if we looked at moderate intensity, there was only minimal declines in forced vital capacity in FEV1. But there was looked at measure of bronchodilation, which is FEF 2575, or the forced expiratory flow at 25 to 75% of your forced vital capacity. So this is the effort-independent portion of the flow volume loop, and so it's a measure of intermittent of airway dilation. And we've demonstrated that if you look at these white bars under the moderate intensity submaximal exercise, and then at 60 minutes post, there was no significant difference between the percent change from baseline in FEF 2575 for the CF patients. Then we also looked at our measurement of diffusion capacity of the lungs for nitric oxide, which allows us to look at how well gas is moving from the lungs to the bloodstream. And what we demonstrated is that was with exercise, there's a significant, much greater increase in DLNO, percent change from baseline, with moderate exercise, the black bar here, compared to 60 minutes post-albuterol. Specifically, there was a 40% increase with moderate exercise in DLNO versus only a 15% increase by 60 minutes post-albuterol. The next thing we looked at was ion regulation. And we used both nasal potential difference and exhaled breath condensate, the ion concentration of both chloride and sodium. I'm just going to present on the chloride here for time's sake. And what we found was that with moderate exercise, there was a significant increase in EBC, net EBC chloride from baseline. And when we compared the two treatments, exercise versus albuterol, the percent change from baseline was not different. So we're getting a similar increase in exhaled chloride in both treatment modalities. So if I summarize what has been shown about the previous research and what exercise can do for an individual with CF, there's numerous systemic advantages. It can increase your exercise tolerance and aerobic capacity. It's been shown that it can increase respiratory muscle endurance, increase sputum expectoration or mucus clearance, shown to be able to reduce the rate of decline in pulmonary function. Even as Julie demonstrated, there's a difference when she was more active and less active. Higher levels of aerobic fitness are associated with a significantly lower risk of dying. Then those who are more physically active have higher aerobic fitness. So if you put those two together, collectively suggesting that exercise can increase life expectancy for an individual with CF. And then the more recent research on ion regulation has demonstrated that exercise can inhibit ENOC activity as well as increasing chloride secretion, most likely through a CFTR-independent modality. And that was measured both by NPD and EBC, or exhaled breath condensate. So all the benefits seem clear, but again, the magnitude of the therapy regimen CF individuals are under is huge. And so one of the hotly debated questions, and has been debated at the NACF conference a few times, is can exercise effectively replace one traditional airway clearance technique? And as Ronnie discussed, the CF community came up with 60 questions, narrowed it down to 5, and again, this was the top winner for them. And so with the goal of the CF Cystic Life community's research question to be answered, the patient-initiated platform provides the opportunity to be innovative and also take advantage of the landscape of how we can access patient data and design a study that doesn't have any borders. It's a chance to kind of quantify the anecdotal experiences of patients like Julie and Ronnie and many others that I have met, and these two have met too and spoken with over the years. But as the researchers that I've described, there's opportunities for expansion and improvement. We've mentioned that the sample size is pretty small. We only had one study that had about 100 people. And this is partly because it's difficult to conduct, but more than that, its exercise funding is pretty limited. Usually the highest priority is the drug research. So generally research you can't afford to recruit hundreds of people that gets done as most clinical trials. But by taking a different approach with this study, we can more easily involve a larger group of people using smartphone apps, wireless monitoring, the ability to upload patient data to a cloud that can be accessed, so you don't have to necessarily be coming into a certain center to participate. The other issue or limitation is the lack of exercise variety. It's been a very limited chunk of exercise modality. It's always been cardio, it's always a standard, either it's been running, it's been cycling. But in order for someone to want to exercise, and hopefully this portion of their treatment will be one that they enjoy, you want to kind of see if all these information about the exercise benefits apply to any form of activity, or if you have to have certain requirements of the exercise modality. Like was shown with the sputum, treadmill was more effective at changing the properties of the sputum than cycling was. So do we need to have a certain requirements for our exercise to be the most effective treatment for an individual with CF? Those are questions we still don't know the answers to. The other thing is that there's a trend to generally be using a dose of about moderate intensity. Usually most studies have been used about that, but we want to look at their other quantification methods, if there's a difference in total time sedentary, total number of steps, active minutes, and also the time spent in these moderate and vigorous activity levels, and see if that makes a difference. So we had to, rather than design an interventional study, which is how the original research question by the Cystic Life community was phrased, we've modified it to allow us for the design of an observational and longitudinal study. And so the modified question has become, do individuals with CF who are more physically active show improvements in or maintenance of clinical status or quality of life? So instead of having one group only do exercise and no ACT and no exercise, or have them replacing a bout, which would be difficult to get approved by any CF patient's pulmonologist, not really feasible if we want to be able to include people from a variety of locations and regardless of where they live. Instead, we want to quantify what the CF patients are already doing. And so we want to recruit patients who, if there's those that are completing daily air clearance but aren't exercising, that we want those people. If they're exercising daily but they don't do air clearance, those exist. Replacing people that replace a treatment with an exercise bout, or what they're prescribed they do extra. And then if they individuals who don't do any airway clearance and don't exercise, the goal will just be to have patients do what they normally do while we observe and quantify the results of these choices on the individual's clinical status. So the overall goal of the research will be to determine whether regular activity alters the clinical course of cystic fibrosis, specifically with this proposal defining the relationships between physical activity patterns and airway clearance techniques with clinical status, and trying to determine if there's a threshold below which you don't get the benefit that we need to be an effective treatment, or determine what dose you do need to be the most benefit. So our specific aims are to assess the difference in clinical status and quality of life for individuals with CF who are physically active in addition to or in place of some or all of their prescribed airway clearance, to those who do not exercise but complete their prescribed ACT. So we started this portion of the question by just sending out a survey, trying to gather information of how active are you, what are you doing, what type of exercise are you doing, what airway clearance are you doing, and then looking at the relationship with their clinical status. And Rania sent out that survey last week, and we're just collecting the responses right now, trying to get the biggest reflection of the whole CF population. And then finally, we had to determine the relationship between quantifying physical activity intensity, duration, and mode on clinical status and quality of life with individuals with CF, and to assess, again, if there's a minimum threshold and a dose relationship. And we're going to planning to give people activity monitors and compare this to their clinical status using markers like time between exacerbations or IV antibiotics, their FEV1 looking at either baseline change over the 1 year, every annual change, and CF quality of life scores to determine what level of activity produces the best clinical outcomes. And hopefully with this research, the aim goal to help quantify these anecdotal experiences of individuals with CF. And I think with that, we're ready to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, all three of you. That was very informative. I know that we would like to talk a little bit about the crowdfunding. Ronnie, could you take a couple of minutes? I know we're bumping up against the hour here, but could you talk a little bit about how this research is being funded?
Sure. Yeah, let me share my desktop and just give a very high-level overview of CysticLife members are able to, we're crowdfunding the funds necessary to run this research. And as you can see, if you're a CysticLife member, you log in, you can get to your fundraising hub if you choose to join the campaign. And just very quickly, so we can allow time for questions, we've made it very easy to add contacts. This is through your email, or you can manually enter your contacts, and we have, we're working with a third-party partner who can basically pull your contacts from a variety of sources. After you've decided who you'd like to send emails to, then you can personalize emails that will go out. We have created kind of templates that you're able to use, but if you want to make it more personal, which we encourage, then you can edit those, and then those emails are sent out on a schedule. And, of course, the emails will stop if the person getting the emails, asks for them to stop, unsubscribes, or if they donate, the email will stop. But there's just a few reminders and then kind of a final call to donate. And then this, after you have uploaded your contacts, personalize the emails, then you can, of course, just approve and send out the emails. Each of these has screens behind the button. So if I were to click here, you'd go to a different screen. And then finally, you can review your progress and see how much money you've raised, how much the community has raised, and how many emails you sent out, etc. And then we give ways to share, this campaign on social media. You can create a team, and so you can build your team out, and the monies that team raises get ultimately credited to each individual team member, but then kind of the lead of that team. And then, of course, people can choose to raise money outside of this system and just use their own personal donation link to raise the funds. Currently, we actually have not, released this to the entire community while we're making sure everything works properly and works on all screens, etc. So we only have about 6 people raising money, and we've raised over $6,000. And so we, of course, hope when we release it to the entire community, it's all about joining the campaign, uploading your email contacts or putting them in manually, and then sending these personalized emails out to friends, families, and contacts, because what we found is essentially the average donation is over $100, and if we're able to onboard multiple fundraisers, multiple members who are willing to raise money, there's no doubt in my mind that we can get to our goal if the Cystic Life and cystic fibrosis community at large buy into this and decide that they're willing to help us raise money. To give you an idea, we're hoping to raise $250,000 to conduct this study that Courtney highlighted. We believe that will give us enough money to at least get the ball rolling for the first year, and we're really excited about it. And so I'd love to take any questions if we have time. I understand people who need to drop off, but if you do have a question, I can certainly stick around and answer them.
Okay, so we do have a question. How did the Cystic Life Research Advisory Board come together?
Sure. So the first call I made was to Julie Dash, who presented earlier. And anytime I'm working on a project, I want her involved because she's so smart and eloquent and thinks of things that I don't. What's really cool is she can wear two hats. She can wear the hat of a CF patient, and she can wear the hat of a pathologist. So called her, and it started with her and I. And then basically we made a list of people we knew that we thought would be a good fit, and started calling those folks. And then we filled 6 of the 9 positions that way. And the last 3, we put a call out to Cystic Life members who are interested in being a part, and they sent us. We actually got over 50 resumes or CVs of people who wanted to be a part of this board, and so we filled the last 3 seats that way.
That's great. Thank you very much. Well, in the interest of time, we'll have to cut our webinar. But if anyone has questions, please feel free to contact our speakers, especially Ronnie. He did put his information up at the beginning. Also, this webinar will be on the Ambry website as a recording in a couple of days. And for those who registered for the webinar, we'll go ahead and send that link out to you. So thank you so much to all of our speakers and all of our attendees, and please have a great day.